Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 378, and I had a conversation with Mike Farrell. Mike is a producer, director, and actor, best known for his role as BJ Hunnicutt on the beloved and extraordinary show MASH, and as Dr. James Hansen on Providence, among many, many other roles and programs. He's also the president of the board of Death Penalty Focus, which is committed to the abolition of the death penalty. He's a human rights and refugee activist, and he's Goodwill Ambassador for the UN High Commission for Refugees. He's also an author. I had such a good time talking with Mike. He's an extraordinary human being and just really fascinating to talk with. It was a delightful conversation. I'm really excited for you to hear this one. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. Follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. Find my albums on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you get your music. And look for my albums all over the place. All I ever wanted was everything, How to Say Goodbye, Surfacing to Breathe. They're all out there. Check out my relationships and sex show with sexologist and healthcare practitioner Mara Edelman on YouTube under Are We There Yet podcast show. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for listening. Be well, be love, be kind, and here we go. Mike Farrell, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you.
And shout out to Bob Zoff for connecting us.
Yes, that was nice of Bob.
Yeah, he's been on the show and he has introduced me to a lot of really wonderful folks. So I was really pleased when he connected us.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah.
He's Bob's quite terrific, and he's really does a lot of good for a lot of really, really important people. Which is Gary. Gary Tyler was our common link, and I'm sure you've spoken to Gary. So
yeah, he was on the show. What an extraordinary story, and
isn't it though? I mean, he's the example for me of what's possible and what's wrong with this bloody system.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
What humans are capable of enduring and surviving,
mm-hmm.
and coming through whole, because there's so many who are damaged, incredibly damaged. I mean, Gary can't have avoided damage, but somehow he's I don't know. There's a quality to him that is just quite extraordinary, I think.
It's the artist. It's
and I think you're right. He recognizes that, and he uses that, and it helps him. This is butterfly concept. I've been in the cocoon for a long time. Is really wonderful. But even before I didn't have any idea about his artistic abilities when I first met him. And it was just something deeply sweet about him that I responded to, and then the work, of course, he got involved with immediately, helping young people, was right up my alley. So I was. Yeah.
He has an innate kindness, and the thing that strikes me the most about, and we're going to get into all of this, the death penalty and the reform of death penalty, and all of that, but it's. What an incredible tragedy. Anytime a life is taken, a tragedy. But for somebody that is innocent and was innocent and was able to maintain not only his dignity, but a sense of purpose throughout his entire incarceration. And imagine if that light had been cut out.
Yeah. What a hole in society that would have left. And, well, yeah.
Yeah. We're in agreement there. Well, let's get into you, Mike.
Okay.
Tell me, where did you grow up? What was childhood? How were you shaped in the beginning?
I was born in Minnesota, but my folks moved here to Los Angeles when I was quite young, too, actually. And I was raised here in West Hollywood, California, before it became a city. It was what they called it, I guess, a county, unincorporated county strip. And, the more I think about it, the more I'm grateful for how lucky I was to have come up in this family. I don't know if any family is perfect, but my dad was a hard drinking, tough talking, and tough acting Irish guy, kind of John Wayne in capital letters. And my mom was a housewife doing her duty and did it extraordinarily. I mean, she raised us, they raised us, but he was kind of the ruler and she was the hands-on person. And I have had an older sister who passed a few years ago, and have a younger brother and younger sister who was the baby of the family. And we, grew up in public schools in a neighborhood where there were a lot of kids, and we flowered, I suppose, is a word. I'm not sure it's the word, but we developed, and you develop with all those lessons. I was my folks were very strict Catholics, and I was raised in a Catholic church, and I was told what you should, thou shalt not do a lot of things and feel a lot of things and say a lot of things. So there was a kind of constraint the church imposed, constant, I think horrifically kind of crippling sanctions. But my dad, he was a very strong and tough man. He wasn't abusive in the sense of beating us up, although he used his hands and a dog's leash whenever he felt that it was necessary to punish. But there was always a sense of impending doom. Impending doom overstates it a bit, but there was always a sense of, okay, if I step out of line here, this is not going to be good. So I grew up with that. And my younger brother was a more of a free spirit than I was. And our baby sister was the apple of my dad's eye, because we were all light-haired, blue-eyed until she came along. He had dark hair and brown eyes. And she was his coloring. So she was sort of his favorite. Although she doesn't remember, it's really sad. She doesn't remember much of that because he died when she was quite young, when we were all quite young. He had a heart attack and died when I was 17 and my brother was 15, I guess. And Kathy was probably 9. Then it was sort of kind of find your way, And for me, being a man was urgently important and necessary. And one way, I was 17, I was just about to graduate from high school. And a buddy of mine and I had played the game of how tough were you and how tough are you going to be and what would you have to do? And the draft was staring me in the face. And so I joined the Marines, prove how tough I am. And served my time not happily. The Marines was an awful experience, but it was a lot like my dad. It was very strict. It was very demanding. It expected you to do absolutely what you were told and do the best you could. And the best you could probably wasn't good enough, so you had to do the best you could again. So it laid a lot of expectations on. And I was pretty young, pretty naive, 19 or 20, I guess, when I got out. And I was I was a Marine veteran, God. And the kids I knew had gone to college, many of them. So I got a job and I tried to figure out what I wanted to be in life. And had always dreamed, I've sussed it out to the degree that my sister, my older sister, Sally, used to, she was, I guess, 5 or 6 years older than I was. And she bring home movie magazines. And the movie magazines, aside from looking at pictures of women, I was able to see that that young people were in that business or got famous. And with fame, of course, one understands comes love and attention and respect and all the things that you want. And so I decided, God, wouldn't that be great to be an actor? And of course, if I'd ever said that to my dad, he had a habit of sarcastic comments, and he would have found a perfect one to nail me with, but he was gone. So I kind of doped around. I got a job driving a truck, and I did various things, but kept sort of wondering and dreaming and hoping that somehow magically I was going to be able to be an actor. I met a guy, gay people in West Hollywood. Even then, there were a lot of gay people. And it became a joke. Going to high school, I never took a bus. I just stuck out my thumb, and almost invariably some gay guy would pick me up and give me a ride. And where are you going? And I'm going to school. And okay, and would you like to? And I said, no, thanks. And he'd drop me off. No harm, no foul. I just got a free ride. But this, I was standing on the corner literally waiting for a bus after I finished work one day. And this man pulled his Cadillac up and got out of it and made a kind of silly pretense about having to clean something off his shoe. And then said, you're waiting for a bus? I said, yeah. And he said, where are you going? And I said, down in West Hollywood. And he said, you want to ride? And I said, sure. And we drove along in his Cadillac, and he gave me his card, and he said, the conversation came up about being an actor. You're a good-looking young man, sort of thing, I suppose. I don't remember the conversation, but he gave me his card. And it turned out he was an agent. I thought, oh, cool. I can call this agent, and the door is opening for me to get into the business. When I got home, I talked about it. My older sister laughed, and she said, that guy is infamous. He's a homosexual who's brings all these young guys into his sort of nest, and watch yourself. And I said, yeah, I take care of myself, no worries. So I called him, and I guess I don't remember where we met or whatever, but at any rate, he said, I have an interview for you for a movie. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. So I thought, well, shit, here it goes. It's beginning. And I went on this interview, and I met a man who I think, and I don't know for sure, that it was Hal Wallace, who was a famous motion picture producer. I'm not sure it was him, but it was a movie, war movie. I was an ex-Marine, blah, blah, blah. And he said, Henry sent you. Henry Wilson was this man's, the agent's name. And he said, Henry sent you. And I said, yeah. And he said, are you one of his boys? And I said, what do you mean? What Henry's price for having a career is what it is. And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, well, let me tell you that every interview you go on that Henry sends you on, people are going to assume that that's the case. I mean, he was really terrific. He was quite straightforward and just warned me. I mean, he saw the innocence, I guess, and he saw the hope and the dreams and the kind of almost childish approach I was taking to this whole thing. And I said, thank you very much, and left. And I went back to Henry, and I said, you Here's what he said. And he said, well, that's essentially right. He said, everywhere you go in this business, you're going to have to be willing to compromise one way or another if you want to make a name for yourself. And I said, no, thank you, goodbye. And it was really an important lesson for me, I think. One, that I had the courage to say no, but also because I was beginning, seems funny to say it, when I was 20, 21 by that time, to form a sense of personal ethics. There were rights and there were wrongs, and not just what my dad and mom said, not just what the church said, but there were things that were right and there were things that were wrong. And I wanted to be real clear about what I was doing and who I presented myself as. Anyway, long story short, but so then I just kind of kept on sort of wishing and hoping. One of the guys I joined the Marines with was working at a gas station on Sunset Boulevard on the Sunset Strip, where we, that was a big deal for us. We'd go up and down the strip and drive up and down and look at the girls, honk the horn. But he was working one night, and a new guy had come in. He was his name was Bud Boyle. Never forget him. Bud was from Prince Edward Island in Canada, and he had come all the way out to the West Coast because he wanted to be an actor. And he said, Mike, I understand you're interested in being an actor. And I said, yeah. And he said, what are you doing about it? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm part of an actor's workshop where we go and we work out with somebody who works, we work scenes and we learn about characters. And he said, I was just scared shitless of the idea. But he said, if you're really serious about being an actor, you might want to consider something like that. And so I went and sat in the back row, but joined his actors group workshop. And, one thing leads to another, and you meet a lot of people and you learn what it's like to stand on stage and what it's like to do a scene and how you begin to, I guess, develop your craft. That led to a play, and that led to an agent, a legitimate agent who could get me some interviews at least. And then I got a few small parts, and then, one thing led to another, and I developed a career, which was ultimately incredibly satisfying and really, really wonderful. I consider myself the luckiest actor in the world for having been part of the television show MASH, because it spoke to all those values I was talking about, and it spoke to them in a very dramatic and very impressive way. And, there were things that happened along the way, but I've just been very lucky.
Were your family members supportive as you were going through that process? Or did they think, what are you going to do with your life? You can't be an actor. That's insane.
Well, that would have been my dad's attitude. My mom was very sweet. She was of this you'll learn school. You're going to get your nose broken, or you're going to get your head bumped, or you're going to do whatever, but you'll learn. And I did. My older sister, was pretty cynical at first, and then she was just proud as hell of me because I made some progress, a little at a time. So the family was at best neutral, and at worst neutral, and at best supportive during that process.
Were you talking to your dad along the way, saying, if you were here, I'm sure you would think I was crazy, but look at me go?
I didn't have those kinds of conversations, but I thought about him a lot. I still think about him a lot. I'm sorry that he didn't last until I could stand up to him, declare myself, as an individual, not a kid that he could push around. But, and I also, when I raised my kids, I made sure that they knew that I loved them and that they were welcome as and a treasured part of my life. The family that he created was, we didn't hug, we didn't talk, we didn't do, the sort of things that I think are essential in a relationship. But it took me a long time and a lot of therapy and a lot of growing up and a lot of broken bones to come to that place.
Oh, love the therapy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about MASH. That was an extraordinarily successful show.
Yes, it was.
And I think what strikes me, I had Ken Levine on the show.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Yeah. Very funny, very, very wonderful experience to talk with him. The thing that really strikes me about MASH, besides the fact that it went on longer than the war it was portraying, is that it had such a deep, to me, sense of morality and understanding of the complication of the human condition, that it wasn't a black and white conversation.
That's
it was so nuanced.
Absolutely so. Absolutely so. And it was that way by through the direction of Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds, particularly, who created the show, and Alan Alda, who they hired. Alan is one of the smartest and one of the most principled people I've ever known. He's incredibly talented, but extraordinarily generous in doing what he did for me, for example, accepting me and making me an equal, almost equal, whatever. But it was, there was no question about who the star of the show was. And I certainly had no quarrel with who the star of the show was. But he and I've told this story a number of times. I tend to get involved in political and social issues and things. I was in Southeast Asia, I guess. Anyway, somewhere in a very impoverished part of the world, and came back because the response I got from the people there who knew the show, one, the fact that they knew the show, and second, what the show meant to them. I came back and Alan and I sat together. We became very close friends. And I've forgotten, it was maybe the second or third year I was on the show. Beginning of the season, we'd, sit around and talk and kind of say hi and what you've been doing lately. And I said to Alan, are you hearing the same thing I'm hearing out there? And he said, yeah, I am. And I said, this show really means something to people, not only in this country, but around the world. And it means what you were just talking about. It means something about the human value and about peace and about morality. And just the things that I think were at the core of what Larry and Gene set up, but it needed that. It needed reassurance on the parts of other people. You've got a television network that all they care about is ratings. They don't give a damn what you do or say, except they don't want you to swear. They used to not want you to swear. Now they don't mind. Anyway, he and I sort of talked about it for quite a while. And then we got the cast together and we said, look, it's up to us to make sure that this show continues to live up to what the audience out there believes it means, and hold high that premise that people matter, that blood's not spilled without cost, that human beings are on both sides of any disagreement, and right or wrong is sometimes hard to define, but you have to do what you think is the best you can do. And to their credit, everybody got it, understood, agreed. And so I think the last 4 or 5 years of the show, 4 years of the show maybe, were, partly that I was in it, but were more focused than the first few years, and it was intentional. And the writers got it. We did stuff, talking about the human foibles, but did it in a way that I can't tell you. I get mail every day from people still 50 years later talking about the show and what it means to them and continues to mean to them. And
that's great.
Yeah, it is. It's really remarkable.
When you were reading for the part,
yeah.
Hunnicutt, were you going in with that, I don't know how to put that exactly, that weight, or had you not quite wrapped your head around that yet? I mean, because it was already a hit show. It
was a hit show. You're right. No, I'll tell you a story. I was, by that time I was doing well in the industry. I had done 2 years on a soap. I had done 1 season on a main series that was primetime, and I had done 2 actually series with really wonderful actors. Broderick Crawford was the star of one of them, and Anthony Quinn, great Anthony Quinn, was the star of another one. And I got to work with some really wonderful, talented people. And then when the Quinn series failed, in order to do the Quinn series, they required that I sign a contract with Universal Studio. And I thought, I'm not sure I want to do that, but I wanted to work with Quinn. So I said, okay. And then when the show ended, as I knew it would, he was much too big, much too powerful for television. I thought, well, maybe they'll let me out of the contract. And of course they didn't. They wanted me to do guest stars in all the series that they did and some of the really dopey. So I kind of became Peck's bad boy on the lot. I would say, no, I don't want to do that one. And they'd say, you don't have the right to say no. And I said, yeah, they do. And they'd say, well, that means you're on suspension. Your contract is, we're not going to pay you for that week or those 2 weeks or whatever it is. I said, okay. So we came to this agreement that I was, but they really did give me some really good opportunities to do shows. One, I was, a friend of mine called me and he said, let's have dinner. And I said, great, I'd love to see you. And went to his place and I knocked on the door and he came to the door and I said, let's go. And he said, oh, wait a minute, I can't leave yet. My favorite show is on. And I said, what's that? And we went in and it was MASH. And I'd never seen the show. I was entranced. There was a scene I'll never forget with Gary Berghoff, Radar, 19-year-old, kid off the farm in Iowa or wherever, with essentially bombs bursting and blood spurting and shit going on. And he was sort of trying to keep it all together. And I thought, what a magnificent show. How frigging lucky are those people to be doing that show? And I just fell in love. And then I went back to work. I was doing this or that. And then I got a call from a producer who said, I would like you to star in my new series. And I said, well, can I read the script? And he said, sure. So he sent me the script, and it was just a silly show, just one of those 3 jokes to a page kind of thing, just like manufactured humor. I said, thanks, but no thanks. And he said, you're turning down the lead in a television series? And I said, yeah, I guess I am. And he said, why? And I didn't want to say, well, your show is stupid. So I said, well, it's not MASH. And he looked at me, and I said, what I mean is MASH is about something. And I want to do a show that's about something, not just a show that does jokes. So he found somebody else, I'm sure. Although I don't think the show ever got on the air. But I'll never forget that, because a year later, my agent got a call, said, Wayne Rogers is thinking about leaving the cast of MASH. We'd like to know if Mike Farrell would be interested in coming over and having a conversation with us. We don't know that Wayne is going to leave. We're still trying to work out his contract. But in the event he does, we have to have somebody to replace him. And we're going to see a bunch of actors, and we'd like to see Mike Farrell. So he said, can you do that? Can you come over there and meet them? I said, shit, can I? The question is, can I? I'm under contract here at Universal. And he said, well, that's not going to hurt to go and have a meeting. And I said, okay. And I went in and met with Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds and I think Burt Metcalf at that point. Burt, I had known Burt slightly. He was a casting director at Universal, and he was now the associate producer of MASH. And at any rate, we had this conversation where I felt like I stumbled and mumbled and grumbled and farted through the entire thing. I thought it was the worst interview I'd ever done. And I finally apologized. I said, listen, I'm sorry. I said, I hope you know I'm a professional and I've done a lot of good work and I've been involved in things. But I am so in love with this show. The idea of meeting you guys with the possibility of being a part of it has me in a panic. And they were wonderful. They were just terrific. And they said, would you have any concerns about doing this, stepping in where Trapper John had trod? And I said, my one concern is that I wouldn't be interested in becoming Trapper John. I think that'd be a big mistake. Actor replacing, another. They said, no, we quite agree with you. They said, it's the military. People transferred away, people get shifted, people die, people whatever. So what we have in mind is a fellow medical doctor who's married and has a baby at home and is not going to be a womanizer like Hawkeye and Trapper have been. How would you feel about that? I said, you asked me how I would feel about modeling fidelity on national television. I wouldn't mind that at all. So I don't know. I don't know how many actors they met. I know I got a call some days later to come in, and they asked if I would be willing to do a screen test. And they said, it's not about whether you can act, it's about a test with Alan to see kind of how you two play together. And I said, absolutely. And went in and did it and thought I did a terrible job and went home thinking, it's a comedy, for Christ's sakes. Why couldn't you have found a way to be funny? But fortunately, I got a call saying, you're the guy. And
well, there's such a dryness to him and such a grounding to that character that if you had gone in blazing, comic guns, it wouldn't have worked.
No. Of course it wouldn't. But I was that was part of my second guessing myself.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
Shit, you fool. But,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was great. I mean, it was, and it turned into just a wonderful goddamn experience. Alan called me that night and he said, "Are you free to have dinner? I'd like to have dinner with you." And I said, "Absolutely." And we sat and talked for hours about what his hopes and dreams were for the show and how much he cared about it and how important it was that we stay, the same kind of stuff we talked about later when I came back from Southeast Asia. And it was such a wonderful thing for him to do, first of all. And second, it was really a kind of a leg up for me. I was suddenly coming into this group that was reputed in the industry to be a very close family, and I'm taking the place of one of their brothers. The cast might hate me. So Alan's opening the door the way he did was really very generous of him and very impactful to me. And then when I went on the set, the first guy who walked up to me and said hello was Gary Berghoff, the fellow who I'd seen in that scene. Stuck out his hand and said, "Welcome aboard." And then Loretta and Bill and Jamie and Larry. I mean, it was just wonderful. And the point I wanted to get to was the first day, which was the same thing we did every show. We would sit around a table and read the script aloud, and for the writers to hear it, to have a way to feel whether a certain joke works or if there's something needs to be punched up or whatever. Anyway, so you start, and Gene Reynolds, who was the director, said page 1, and we read through the thing, and there were some laughs, and at the end, people applauded and welcome Mike and all that stuff. And then Gene said, "Okay, page 1." And I looked at him, we had just done that. And he said, "Oh, Mike," he said, "here's where we go through page by page to see if you have any questions, any suggestions, any ideas. We just want to hear from you about." And I thought, honest to God, I think I've died and gone to heaven. I had done 2 years on a soap and 2 television series, and nobody had ever asked me, although I'd offered some thoughts at times, but nobody ever said, "We want you to give us your take on the script." And I heard people say, "I think this joke could work better if Bill did it," or "How about if we try this?" It became what I finally understood to be a creative community. It was people working together to try to make the show as good as it could possibly be. And it never stopped. I was there for 8 years, and they were 8 of the happiest years of my life in terms of my career. My God, it was and remains the finest experience I've ever had. I've done some really good things before and since, but nothing will ever reach that was the epitome, I guess is the word, of what I wanted to be part of in this business.
That's so lovely. And I really enjoy hearing that it was such a collaborative experience as well. I think that's important for,
absolutely,
first of all, that Alan Alda understood what it means to be a leader and brought you to dinner. And because that example shines throughout the entire project.
Absolutely right.
For him to have a grasp of that. And then for the directors and such to know that it is a group effort, that it is so much. I mean, that's what creation is.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were so many times that was laid out for me. A couple of times working on scripts. There was one, they worked hard. And I just think of one in particular. There was a scene that they took out of research they had done. They'd gone to Korea and they'd reached out to people who'd been in the MASH, doctors, nurses, and patients. And so they used a lot of the things they'd found in this research as sort of things in the show, either plots or ideas or moments. There was one where we sat down and read this script about a bunch of Hawkeye and BJ were really upset that a lot of kids, young kids, soldiers, were coming in wounded because this hot-shot officer kept shoving them, pushing them up this hill that was just a terrible bloodshed, bloody battlefield. And we just thought, God damn it, something's wrong here. And then the officer showed up to say to his guys, come on, guys, you got to get back in it. And we were going to fix everything. And I need you. And we came up with this scheme to buddy up with him, go take him into the swamp, get him drunk on the stuff we fermented in the still, and give him a Mickey, tell him he was having appendicitis, and put him on the table and take his appendix out, and take him off the line for a while in the hopes that would save some kids' lives. So we read through the script, and at the end of it, everybody applauded, and we went through the one page one by one. And we got to that point, and I said, yeah, I've got a problem here. And they said, what's that? I said, BJ wouldn't do that. And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, cutting into a healthy human body is not something that BJ Hunnicutt would do. And they said, well, we got it out of the research. I said, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not saying these guys over there made that choice. I'm saying that the fellow that you and I are creating in this series would not do that. And Alan piped up. He said, Hawkeye would. I said, I get it. I don't have any problem with that. I'm just telling you that BJ wouldn't. And we must have talked for half an hour. And finally, Burt Metcalf said, God, he said, we got a better show here than we have on the page. So we did that, and we got him drunk. And then Alan said, let's get him into the OR. And BJ said, you're not really going to do that. And he said, God damn right I am. And BJ said, no, man, he can't. And he did. And he came back in after the surgery, and I said, how was it? And he said, it was ripe and healthy and looked perfectly fine to me. And talking about the appendix. And then they put in the sound of helicopters, and wounded were coming in. And we looked at each other, and it didn't need to be said. It was just that what you didn't stop anything. Yeah. So, but the part about it that stays with me is that they heard me. They heard what I was saying about this character and what he meant to me, and I thought to everybody else, and they honored it. So that's kind of an example, I think, of.
I appreciate too that they brought that character to life as a type of moral compass throughout the series, and did not ignore the fact that it didn't mean that you were infallible.
That's right.
But I think that's so important.
No, in fact, absolutely. Yeah. We did another scene one time. It was in Radar's or Klinger's office. I forget. I guess maybe it was after Larry left, and it was Klinger's office. Alan was on the phone. Oh, no. Yeah. The actress Blythe Danner came in to play a traveling nurse who'd come into our compound on temporary duty. And it turned out, and Hawkeye, had an affair when they were in medical school together. And suddenly, here they were again, and I think she was married. And suddenly the affair blossomed, and they were And he said to me, he said, Hawkeye to BJ said, I haven't been around lately. I said, yeah, I missed you. I've been crying into my pillow. And he said, do you disapprove? I said, not my place to disapprove. He said, have you ever been unfaithful? And I said, never. And he said, have you ever been tempted? I said, tempted's a different question. And he said, aha, you have it. I said, no, I just said tempted's a different question. I didn't say. Anyway, so it was a joke. And it was a good scene. And we ended the scene and we went out, and Larry Gelbart, who had written the scene, was there watching. And I said, Larry, that was fun. That was great. I really enjoyed it. But for BJ to say, I've never been tempted, isn't human. I think the joke worked, but I think it's important that we recognize that BJ is just as subject to temptation as everybody else. And a year later, Gene came to me and he said, you remember that conversation you had with Larry about being tempted? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, how would you feel if BJ fell off the fidelity wagon? And I said, whoa, that depends on how it's done. And he said, okay, let us think about it. And they came back with a script where and one of the nurses had gotten a Dear Jane from her beloved, I guess. And Kelly, I guess, came to me and said, nurse, whatever, is really having a rough time. Would you be willing to go talk to her? And I said, sure. And I went in and we talked and how tough it is. And she said, it's just, it hurts so much and you're away from the one you love. And she walked toward me and we embraced, and then suddenly we were kissing and then fade out. So who knows what happened thereafter, but one can assume. And the rest of the show was about Hawkeye saying, what are you doing? I'm writing Peg. About what? About what I did. No, you're not. He said, you are not going to write that. We had a fight. It was fabulous. And he finally made the point. He said, you're going to visit that kind of pain on her when she can do nothing about it. Tell her when you get home, but not now. I think that's the one where I got drunk and I punched Hawkeye, and it was the whole big deal. God,
such a great show. Oh, yeah. Such a great show. So many. Look, for those who are listening, if you've never experienced that show, I cannot recommend it enough. It's brilliantly acted, brilliantly written, brilliantly directed. You made choices that were so extraordinary that hadn't even the perspective from the patient, the person being operated on, that episode.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
Wonderful things. Really, the point of view that was called. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I came in one day in my second year on the show, and I said to Bert, I've got an idea for an episode. He said, yeah, what is it? And I ran it by him, and he said, that's terrific. Why don't you go write it? And I said, whoa. And I had done some writing, but not of the level. He said, don't worry about it. We've got a group of writers here. You write it down. We go into the room. We talk about it. But it was that creative community. It was like, whatever you want to do, we want everything you'll give us. It was just amazing, really amazing to be part of that.
When you left the show, when it finished,
yeah,
what an epic ending!
Yes, it was.
I'm sure you've been asked this a gajillion times, but I understand that people who are on sets, especially for a long time, that they take memorabilia with them. Was there a part of the set that you took with you?
Yeah. Yeah, I have it in my office. I don't think it's here anymore. I have it down in my office. The sign that was on the swamp outside the swamp saying San Francisco, which was shorthand for Mill Valley, where New Jay was from.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that was wonderful. That, and I've got my boots, and I just read that Alan donated his boots and his dog tags to an auction for a college that he supports, and he made just a ton of money, which is just great.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing all that.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. It's I don't know if you just wanted to talk about MASH, but as you can tell, I'm always happy to do that.
Yeah, no, I want to talk about everything. I mean, if you have time, and I'd like to know from there. I think it sounds like, especially given that environment, it had such an impact, obviously here at home, but globally. And it sounds like you started to see the world. I mean, you were already a Marine, so you saw the world, but where did that part of you start to really begin to develop this understanding that you have a huge humanitarian aspect of who you are? Because not everybody has that.
I understand that. Yeah. It didn't happen by accident. None of these things happened by accident. But I got married shortly after I got home, 4 years, I guess, after I got home from being a Marine. And the marriage lasted for about 3 years, and then it fell apart. And I was devastated, just leveled. And psychologically, I was just a wreck. And a friend of mine said, he was part of this organization. They called it the House. It was actually called the Manhattan Project, interestingly enough.
Whoa.
Yeah, right. And it was run by a group of former reformed drug addicts and people out of prisons and people out of mental institutions, the whole thing, full deal, full on therapy. And he said, you need to go to the house. And he set up a meeting for me with the two guys. One was a psychological social worker, and the other was a former addict, who was one of the heads of the place. And he said, you need to tell them you want to be part of it, and you're going to have to stand up and make a commitment. And I said, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, but okay. So I went and I sat and I talked to these guys, and they kept saying, so what do you want? And I said, I want my wife back, and I wanted this, and I want. And they said, what we've discovered is that people who come to us from whether it's drugs or out of prison or out of jail, off the streets, whatever, want the same three things. They want love, they want attention, and they want respect. What do you want? I want my wife, and I want my this, and I want to have that. Right. Well, we understand that. But what we found is that, and I think back over this now, I was so into my own grief. They probably did that 5 times. What we understand, what we've found is that anybody who is in pain from whatever wants is to be loved, to have attention paid, and to have respect. What do you want? And I thought, that's what they want me to say. I said, okay, I want to be loved. I want to have attention paid. I want to be respected. And I started to weep. God, I was just blowing tears. And before I could finish the sentence, the two of them had leapt up and were holding me. First time in my life I'd ever been held by a man. And this was 2 men. And I just wept until I was dry. And they said, okay, the first meeting is Tuesday at such and such. We expect you to show up. And I said, I'll be there. And I spent a year there with junkies and whores and drug addicts of all type and gay people who couldn't deal with their gayness and lost people out of mental hospitals. Just it was quite extraordinary, really quite extraordinary. And I remember one early, we did a lot of group therapy with tough, hard people, some of them. This guy said something, and I said something back to him, a little stronger than usual. And he said, who the fuck are you? And I said, I'm Mike. He said, what the fuck is a Mike? And I thought, whoa.
An excellent question.
Whoa, yeah. Whoa, that I ought to think about that for a while. Oh man. So that over time I became the new people that came in, they called stupid, part of the stupid group, too stupid to know what they wanted. And if you graduated from the stupid group, you became responsible. And after I challenged Ernie at something, and that made me responsible, and I moved into the responsible group. And that meant I went out to prisons with them when we offered this program to people who were going to get out of prison and say, or jail, whatever, and say, look, it's not going to do you any good to go back to the same situation that put you here. We offer this program. Give it some thought.
And without touching the pain that brought them there.
Absolutely. So I was there working with these folks and working with myself and, kind of getting it together. And I've never forgotten it. And going into prisons really opened a door for me. I saw how dehumanizing it is, and I saw how people became integers. They became numbers. They became less than human. And I had always thought the death penalty made no sense, but I thought at the top of this lousy system, after it dehumanizes all these people, it then kills them. That's the worst. I mean, that's the most chicken shit and the worst kind of societal decision I can imagine. This was before MASH. So I was doing, the stuff I was doing. I was trying to build a career, and then MASH happened. And I got involved in, there was a Black revolution, there was a gay revolution, there was a women's revolution, and I got involved in all of them because we were doing that stuff at the house, and it was pointing out how harmful the way society operated was to so many of its members. Mm. So I went down to Operation Bootstrap downtown after the LA riots, and I went to any number of places and got involved in stuff. And then, so when MASH happened, I was doing things, but suddenly I was the star of one of the premier shows on television, and press was interested in what I was doing and why I was doing it. So people contacted me. One was a group that works with refugees around the world. And I got associated with them and worked with them and traveled to Southeast Asia and did a lot of stuff with them, and then became involved as their spokesperson. But one of the things that has been ongoing, and that is as well, but one of the things that's been ongoing is a minister called me on the set. I don't know how he got the number, but he did. And he said, I understand you're against the death penalty. And I had signed a petition or something saying, yes, I'm against the death penalty. I said, yeah, I don't know what I can do about it, but I'm against it. And he said, I think I'd like to come out and talk to you. And I said, okay. His name is Joe Engel. He's was then the head of the Southern Coalition on Jails and Prisons in Nashville. And he said, in 76, that there was a decision made by the Supreme Court that reopened the death chambers. 72, they were stopped nationwide, and then it was reopened in 76. And there were a couple of executions in the late 70s, but we really hadn't gotten going in the execution business. So he said, we're going to have a bloodbath in this country, and I need somebody who can get publicity, get press to help me do my work. And I said, okay. And he invited me down to Nashville, and he took me to my first death row, which was not something I'll ever forget. And I've been in a lot of death rows since then, but when you're a newbie to it, being in a place with these men in cages, and they were all men, and they were almost all black or brown, and some of them were really excited to see me, and some of them were angry at me for being there. And some of them were just moved enough by our presence, mine and Joe's, to want to talk. And we talked. I've still got a guy gave me a crucifix he made out of matchsticks. That's on my wall down there too. Mm. And so I started working with Joe with the Southern Coalition. And at that time, I was also working with organization trying to change the U.S. policy in Central America. The refugee aid organization that I was working with asked me if I would fly to Honduras and take a load of medical supplies to the camps where their people were working. So I did that and brought along a couple people. Just one. It's in this life, these things all sort of thread into each other and make a tapestry of some kind. The death penalty work is something that I've continued as has been the human rights in general. I was actually one of the founders of Human Rights Watch in California and traveled to various parts of the world in support of human rights understandings and human rights covenants. And the UN asked me, along with some others, to go to Somalia when 1992, I guess it was, when the Marines were sent into Somalia and the country was in chaos and people were dying by the bushels. And then they asked again if I'd go to, and on that trip, we also went to Bosnia. Mm-hmm. Terrible war going on there, the Serbs against the Bosnian Muslims.
Genocide.
And then, speaking of genocide, asked me to go to Rwanda after the slaughter there. So this stuff, they all leave marks.
I was just going to ask, how does one firstly prepare oneself to go into those experiences, and how do you not carry it with you to the point where it dulls you to the world now?
Oh, I don't think it dulls you. I think it heightens your awareness of everything around you.
Not everybody. And what I mean by that is that I think for some to experience the cruelty that we can inflict upon each other, some folks, their response to that would be, I can't look at it, I can't think of it anymore, I'm going to put my head in the sand. Whereas other people, I think, go toward it to embrace those that are left in the aftermath and to try and figure out how to keep it from happening again, which, I mean, good luck with that, right? Human beings have this unfortunate innate tendency for cruelty that I will never, even when we talk about I'm sort of going amok here, but even talking about the death penalty, and I think the irony of somebody being walked in to be strapped in, let's say, lethal injection to meet their doom, and on the other side of the wall is the person pushing that button. So while removing a person that you feel is unworthy of living life anymore because they took someone's life, you're creating a murderer at the same time.
Right.
There's literally no sense to that whatsoever.
I couldn't agree more. No sense to it. And it is terribly destructive of everybody involved in the process. And I speak a lot on the subject. So I cite Dr. Rush, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, who was anti-slavery and a medical doctor. And he opened something called the Pennsylvania Prison Project, and he was avowedly anti-capital punishment. And he said that killing another human being brutalizes everyone associated with the process. And I think that's what's happening to our society. We are continuing to re-brutalize ourselves and worsen ourselves as a result. So, it's trying to find that little moment of openness in somebody that says, you don't have to be afraid, or you can be afraid if you choose, but understand that your fear is what's keeping you from accepting the reality of the good around you. And, join us. We've got ways in which we can stop this.
And then there's those who are indifferent to it all, right? Which is even more terrifying, to be indifferent to something like that.
I agree. It's the antagonists that are easiest to deal with. Those who are indifferent are the hardest to get through to.
Why do you think it is? You can only speak for yourself. We can try and understand why other people think the way they do, but why do you think it is that the idea of humanity and being humane has, maybe it always has been, I haven't been around forever or anything, but that it's been politicized so much?
Politicized is a good word. Factionalism. You find yourself, or one tends to find oneself allying with people who see things sort of in a manner that's less painful than the ones that see things in a manner that's more painful. And instead of just, dealing with it on a pain scale, instead of opening up and just sort of allowing yourself to be present and recognize, I grow tired of saying that all human beings want the same thing: love, attention, and respect. And without them, people turn into human pretzels trying to get some sort of vestige of what those real things might offer. Stick needles in your arms, or attack others, or do whatever you will. Just understanding that you're lovable, that you deserve to be loved, that you deserve to be respected, and that you deserve to have attention paid. God, what an extraordinary understanding.
And if I don't have that feeling in myself, it's going to be really easy to turn my back on another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are you still figuring out who the fuck a Mike is?
It becomes more clear to me regularly, but I'm still in the process.
As a person who was raised Catholic, do you believe, I'm not going to ask you what your faith is because I think that's such a nebulous question, but what do you believe in, a higher power or higher consciousness to it all?
Yeah, whatever it is, I think there's something sort of higher, whether it be the acknowledgement of your own power, whether it be the acknowledgement of something else that's out there that can steer you in the right direction. I don't know. What I know is it's worth considering and working toward, if not figuring it out. Maybe figuring it out is too big a trip, but it's worth toward acting as if.
Like that. Yeah. Can you let people know the best way to find your organizations? How can they dig in?
Sure. Death Penalty Focus is at deathpenalty.org. That'll get you right to us. Concern America is concernamerica.org. Human Rights Watch, everybody knows, I think. It's Human Rights Watch is based in New York, but operates worldwide. And I was lucky enough to be part of the foundation of it here on the West Coast because of the work I had been doing and that we were doing. But it's not just our organizations. There are a lot of good organizations out there. Amnesty International.
I keep a really solid links page on heyhumanpodcast.com with things that we've talked about and how to find them. And I know you've written books and so all that information I'll compile so it's easy for people to find.
Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much for caring enough to ask for it. That's, I wasn't sure what Bob had in mind when he recommended me, but I thought this sounds interesting. So sure.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And thank you for listening, everybody.
You've been very generous with your time and with your very, very good questions and your interest. Your interest is really appreciated.
Thank you. I have an idea of what the world is capable of. I'd like to see all of us get there.
It'd be great.
In my lifetime, who knows? I don't know, but I know that it does start with exactly that: attention, love, and space of listening too. I mean, I think we're so busy talking over each other. Yeah. And I know that cacophony is placed so that we don't ever have to get so quiet that we hear ourselves think. And it's my goal to help facilitate conversations where people might listen and think, oh, maybe I can think about that just a little tiny bit and just open that window just a little bit, Good
for you for doing this. This is important work.
Yeah, I feel like it is.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really been an honor and a delight to talk to you. And thank you for just being on the planet and making it better.
Well, it's a thrill for me. Thank you very much. You give me hope.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.